In this video, I'm going to try something different. Instead of covering this set of characters one by one, I figured it'd be easier to make one big video and talk about them at length, mainly because a handful of them don't have enough info to go off of to warrant their own video. So let's jump into the meat and potatoes of this rather lengthy topic. First, I want to go over the differences between the terms dolls and dummies. Dolls refer to the android-like copies of the candidates as well as the floor masters. There's a doll for everyone, including non-candidates like Joe, and they all share an uncanny resemblance to their human counterparts. It seems like the main purpose of these dolls was to give the sentient AIs a body. Dummies, on the other hand, refer to the candidates who died during the first trial, excluding the ones who have a relationship to the ones who survived, i.e. Megumi Sasahara and Kugi Kazuchi. I'm of course talking about Ranmaru, Kurumada, Anzu, Hinako, Mai, and Hayasaka. These 6 candidates were introduced to us during the latter half of Chapter 2 via the victim videos. I honestly didn't think they would have that much significance past this, but it turns out they were the main focus of Chapter 3. They were each paired out with one of the remaining candidates, Sarah with Ranmaru, Kana with Kurumada, Kyutaro with Mai, Keiji with Hinako, Reiko with Anzu, and Gin with Hayasaka. A major theme of this chapter is trust, more so than the previous 2 because we're essentially starting from the ground up. How are Sarah and the others going to establish trust with the dummies? And as we'll see later on, how are the dummies supposed to trust each other? It's especially hard for the dummies because they're in a much tougher situation. If they stray too far from the partner, they die. And if Midori dies at any point, they die as well. However, there is one way for the dummies to survive on their own, and that's if they're able to kill their partner before Midori dies, which is exactly what Mai tried to do. But this event only widened the gap between the dummies and the humans because we now know what their objectives are. Each dummy was also given special information that was unique to them. Hayasaka explains that the paired callers can go as far as a room apart. Ranmaru says that there's a human from Asunara within the group. Hinako knows about Midori's ID card, and Kurumada reveals that if a floor master meets their doppelganger, they die. Unfortunately, neither Mai's nor Anzu's information was revealed. Now that all the background information is out of the way, let's take a closer look at each of the dummies. Ranmaru is more or less the leader of the dummies, and has 2 different routes depending on whether So or Kana survived in the previous chapter. In general, he's a level-headed player who takes charge when no one else wants to. We see this on multiple occasions. The first is when he takes the it from Sarah during So's route. After talking with Maple, he recognizes the burden she's been carrying for her allies. Not only that, he wants to prove to himself that he isn't just a doll being controlled by Midori. Second, he tears up the consent form as Sarah was about to sign it. While everyone was focused on saving Keiji, Ranmaru kept a level head. He hadn't given up on Keiji, but this wasn't the way to do it. Ranmaru didn't want Sarah to fall into Midori's hands. Losing her now would be a major blow to the team's morale. Third, he took responsibility for Mai's actions and asked the dummies to work together. They were the ones to betray Sarah and the others first, but they were also willing to forgive them. It'd only be right if they returned the favor. Ranmaru was frustrated at the fact that they couldn't do anything when Sarah and the others were fighting Midori. First they died, then they were brought back as pawns. But he didn't want that. He and the rest of the dummies were humans who made their own choices. The dummies were in disarray before this, opting to preserve their own life over anything else, but Ranmaru's speech was able to resonate with them, and they began rebuilding their trust. Even still, Ranmaru still falls victim to temptation when his own survival is at risk. When figuring out the coffin control system, Ranmaru was brutally reminded of what he really is. There was a small part of him that still believed that he was human, even after being shown his own death. Although he was encouraged to live on as a human, he still had doubts. His interactions with Maple only served to amplify his desires to live, and it got him thinking, would he really be able to go back to being a human if he wins? And was it really possible to win as a team? Take another look at your feelings. Speak the truth and you can sort out your mind. Victory is on the line, right? Only one person can survive, then the death game will end. If you survive as a pair, you can win as a pair. Are you a pair for the objective's sake? Or are you partners? You can get another look at yourself too. Ranmaru's true colors began to show when the desire to win took over the well-being of the group. Being with Sarah made him want to live, and seeing Kurumada on the verge of death made him realize that he didn't want to die. He doesn't have it in him to kill Sarah, but he's willing to kill the others if it means getting out of the death game. The more you want to live, the more real death is. Despite this, there's no way Sarah could go through with betrayal, but Ranmaru was willing to dirty his hands for her sake. In Kana's route, Sarah was able to snap him out of it. He was willing to go to great lengths to ensure Sarah's safety, even wanting to download the AI of Joe into his body because he knew that she cared for Joe more than anyone else. Not only was this kind of weird and creepy, but it just wouldn't work in my opinion. Midori even said that he'd be giving up his own consciousness, so Ranmaru himself wouldn't truly be Sarah's salvation. If for some reason Ranmaru was able to mimic all of Joe's mannerisms, it still wouldn't change the fact that he wanted to betray the others. Joe would never be as selfish as him, and I'd like to believe that Sarah would see right through his guise. At the very least though, at least Ranmaru doesn't go crazy like he does in So's route. Instead of stopping him completely, Sarah breaks down. Ranmaru didn't want to see her suffer and decides to take action anyways, despite Sarah telling him otherwise. He tells Keiji that he overheard the conversation he had with Kurumada and blamed him for supposedly killing him. Ranmaru then goes on by guilt-tripping Keiji, telling him that Sarah trusted him the most. He also believed Keiji to be a part of Asunaro, and that he was the one who brought Sarah into the death game. I don't know about you, but it just sounds like Ranmaru's finding any excuse to kill Keiji, so that he can be the only one closest to Sarah. We then find out that Ranmaru went on to kill either Reiko or Alice. While he did get his just desserts in the end, his actions only served to scar Sarah even more. Kurumada was pretty reluctant to work with Sarah and the others, especially his partner, Kana. Or So, but I think that Kana has a more meaningful relationship with him as opposed to So. He didn't think much of her, and even undermines her relationship with So, despite what she tells him. Kurumada saw So as nothing more than another person who was killed in the death game. However, he did tell Kana something that I thought was interesting. Not losing and winning are completely different things, little missy. Not losing implies that Asunaro had been winning from the start, and that all they were doing was to keep themselves afloat. Kana tells Kurumada that she doesn't want to lose to that urge to die, which is more of a negative way of thinking in this context. Instead of having a mindset where loss is a possibility, she should instead think about winning, which is more positive because it would help her overcome her challenges. There wouldn't be a possibility of loss or any room for doubt. You're playing to win as opposed to playing not to lose. I might be way off on this, so tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Either way, he begins to open up a lot more after reconciling with everyone. He even sacrifices himself during the first Maple fight to let everyone escape. Given his injuries, he was ready to call it quits, but his allies weren't ready to give up on him. As a response of sorts to that, Kurumada decides to head back up to defeat Maple, but Kana saw right through his tough guy act. An Obstructor's goal is complete once it has defeated its enemy. Since Maple's rampage didn't stop, she thought that Kurumada was still alive, and he knew this as well. He wanted to protect the Dummies, but Kana tells him that he should focus on repairing himself because dying wasn't going to solve anything. She was reminded of So and his sacrifice, but I also feel like she saw herself as well, seeing as she'd given up on her life in the past. By the end of the chapter, you can tell he's more conscientious of his allies. Because Kana showed concern for him, Kurumada wanted to return the favor. When he met Keiji again, he begged him not to forsake the others by creating another Midori. As for Ranmaru, their relationship went downhill pretty quickly in So's route. He respected him for wanting to reconcile with Sarah, even allowing himself to get tagged because he didn't want his life to go to waste. However, any respect for him vanished as soon as Ranmaru killed Reiko or Alice. I feel like Kurumada was hurt the most because he knew what Ranmaru did, but he couldn't do anything to stop it. All that talk about wanting to win with everyone, only to betray them at the very end, even risking his life to save someone who he thought he could trust. But there was at least one person he could trust at the end, and it was Sarah. Hinako was the toughest to convince because she went by logic instead of feeling. She's very blunt, and it's hard to get a grasp of what she's thinking. Hinako makes it very clear that she wants no part in helping Sarah. When Keiji was trapped in the coffin, she showed no signs of remorse because he knew what would happen if he killed Midori. Why would she help someone who's trying to get her killed, especially when none of the other dummies did anything either? Needless to say, she was opposed to Ranmaru's idea of reconciliation as well. In fact, it would be to her benefit if Keiji died, because that would mean she'd be free from her collar. But in her mind, there was no way for that to happen. When Sarah disabled the pairing, however, she was given free roam away from Keiji. Although she was skeptical, Hinako wanted to return the favor by disclosing the existence of an ID card. At the beginning of the chapter, she was reluctant to give too much away. She didn't want to be used as a pawn. But she eventually came to put her trust in Sarah, and even looked out for the other dummies, like Kurumada. During the banquet, Hinako's true identity was revealed. There were times when her character wasn't consistent with the information we were given in Chapter 2. The Hinako shown in the victim video wanted to die, yet the Hinako we were talking to wanted to live. It turns out the dummy Hinako was actually a human, who had some sort of connection to Midori. What that was exactly, we still don't know. Despite her cheery attitude, Mai was the first dummy to make a move. However, it seemed as though she didn't want to go through with it. She felt even worse because Kyutaro didn't want to give up on her, or any of the dummies. He knows that Midori's the one forcing Mai to act against her will. Kyutaro was tired of seeing his allies betray each other, because he knows the pain of not being able to save them. He also knows what it feels like to betray others as well. At first, Mai was confused. Why was someone she tried to kill willing to forgive her so easily? Kyutaro sympathized with her, and Mai wanted to reciprocate those feelings back. She questions Hinako and Kurumada on whether or not they're willing to kill their partners. Mai tells them that she doesn't want them to feel the same pain she felt because they were her allies. In the end, she thanks Kyutaro for believing in her. Sarah promises to bring her back. I feel like this pairing was the deepest out of all of them. We really got to see how much an impact Kyutaro had on Mai. She even cried for him and begged him not to sacrifice himself because not only would it make the others sad, but also because she was never able to fully repay him for what he did. If you do want to learn more about Kyutaro's character, you can check out my analysis on him. Out of all the dummies, Hayasaka was the only one to mention Sarah's name in their victim video, or at least have some sort of connection with Sarah. However, he tells us that any information regarding Asunaro was erased from his memory. When searching the office space, he reveals that he did have some connections with the organization. On the surface, Asunaro was an upstanding company, but conducted inhumane and underground research involving euthanizing medicine and human reproduction. As such, he was told to gather data on not only Sarah, but the other participants as well. I assume Hayasaka was thrown into the mix at the very end, and was killed off to hide any evidence. Hayasaka was paired with Gin. He wasn't excited at first, but he came to really respect him at the end. He wasn't just some kid, he was someone who genuinely cared for his allies despite being so young. Gin didn't hesitate to try and save Hayasaka in the locker room, and he showed him support despite not being human. Keiji believes that Gin had associated Hayasaka with Mishima, someone who he was unable to save in the past. Because of this, Hayasaka decides to work with Sarah for Gin's sake, and hopes to reflect on his actions so that he can properly apologize to Sarah and the others. Before he dies, he thanks Gin for teaching him true strength. As for Anzu, well, she really didn't do much. She was more or less the comic relief, which is fitting given how she's a clown and all. She likes to joke around with the other dummies, especially Kurumada. Despite having one of the highest win rates, however, we weren't able to see why that is, which is a shame because I really do like her character. But I think that about does it for the dummies. Again, I was surprised that the game brought them back, and that they weren't just some one-off characters. I do wish we got to learn about their backstories, but all things considered, they were written well enough. If I missed anything, be sure to let me know in the comments. With that said, if you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined. Also, we hit 1K recently, so Midori's analysis will be up next. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video.